So last video we laid out like where our bearings are going to go and where our servo is. This video we're going to talk about creating our linear bearings. We're also going to talk about laying out our sheet for on top. Okay, so again, we want things to be square. We can use our mat to help with that. To begin with, here we're going to take one of our pieces of green folder. We're going to lay out our ruler, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this grid to help me create square lines, okay? So I'm going to line up this edge, or like an edge, with the white line. I want to make sure that when I cut, I'm across the entire mat. Then I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to line up with like the two marks on either end that are in line with one another. And then I'm going to use my knife to score it and cut it, right? So again, kind of like two passes. Okay. So now I'm going to take my sheet, I'm going to lay it on top of my piece, and I'm going to make a mark at the edge of the top, right? So this is the width of the top. You can measure it as well on transfer. So what I'm going to do now with that mark is I'm going to line that mark up on, again, one of these like white lines. I'm going to line the edge of the ruler, or I'm sorry, the edge of the folder on another white line. So now it's going to be square across here. So I'm going to line up. Then again, I'm going to cut two passes with my knife. Now, if you'd rather use a pencil and then scissors to cut this out, that's a perfectly acceptable option also. Okay. So there is my sheet. So again, we're going to take this and we're going to cut it basically two times now. I'm going to cut it at the halfway point and we're going to cut it at the end. Okay, so I'm going to line one of my edges up. I'm going to make a mark at the halfway point. I'm going to make a mark at the end. And again, we're going to like line up the edge and line up our mark. Same exact process here. Again, my fingers are on top of this center rib, keeping them well out of danger. Gonna cut, reposition. And cut. Okay, so now we have like our stationary piece, which fits in the lines practically perfectly. And we have our moving piece, which also fits in our lines like there. So with our moving piece, we are going to transfer the dimensions of our sliders, okay? So I'm going to hold this and find those lines that our bearings are going to be on. I can move this from side to side again. They're parallel, so they should be the same, but, and again, you could measure. Mine are half of an inch in. I can measure again, but we don't really have to. Make our marks. Connect our dots. That's great. Notice I did this like on the light green side because the light green side is going to go down. Consider what side is going to go down. The other thing too I want to mark is about where my motor is, okay? So my motor output, my servo output is like along this line here. So this line here is where my servo is going to go. I'm just going to draw like a dotted line there to just kind of like help differentiate. But that's my servo point, and this is where my sliders go. All right, so we are going to move on to making our linear bearings. So our linear bearings consist of two types of straws. Okay, we have a large paper straw, which was donated to us by Burger King. So thank you, Burger King. We have a large paper straw. That paper straw, the diameter fits pretty perfectly with just like a little bit of gap, which is perfect, around this plastic bendy straw. Okay, you're gonna get two of these plastic bendy straws. So the bendy straws are designed in this instance to like run inside of the paper straw. You'll notice like in this example here that I have put my moving straws on this part here. And I want to talk to you guys about making like this assembly. So firstly, right, we know the distance of our straws is going to be about the distance that we drew this line for our slider. If you want to make it slightly smaller, that is acceptable. So I'm gonna cut one of these. I'm careful not to cut through my paper, okay? So there's my first piece. Second one, I'm gonna cut to exactly the same size, right? And again, we're trying to like cut square, but in this instance, it is less critical that it is perfect, okay? So there are my two plastic straws. Now, I'm going to attach some paper straws. So what I'm gonna do for this instance here is I'm gonna cut my paper straws to about 1 inch, which is two of these blocks. I'm gonna slice it down and through, and then I'm gonna take my next piece, and again, I'm gonna cut it to about 1 inch, like that. Okay, so this piece is gonna go inside of here. We're gonna glue it in place. That's gonna hold this. And then this ultimately is gonna get glued either to like your piece here or the bottom of your moving piece. You can kind of like pick and choose where it's gonna go. We'll talk about that in a little while. So we're gonna take some hot glue. Hot glue is one of the tools, like I was a tech teacher for many years, as you've all taken tech as well, they've probably told you this. Hot glue is the tool that people like hurt themselves on the most because we think it's a toy. Hot glue is not a toy, it is hot, it is dangerous. You shouldn't be using these tools for anything other than they are intended for, which is to glue some pieces together. So please be careful. Any sort of misuse of the tools, you won't be able to finish the project. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna put a little bit of hot glue inside of the straw. We're talking like a couple drops, you know, we don't need a lot. We don't want it to be filled with hot glue because it'll come out the back and you'll likely burn yourself or damage your project or something else. You only need a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna put a couple drops. We're gonna take one of my plastic straws. I'm gonna spin it as it goes in. This kind of helps to distribute that hot glue around the straw. And I'm going to stop once the plastic straw is more or less even with the end of the paper straw. You can kind of see them come together there, okay? So that's our first linear actuator. Now we're gonna do the second one. So again, a tiny bit of glue on the inside. Spin your straw around as it goes in. Once it pops out, bring it back again, line it up straight. Okay. Don't really want the hairs, so we're gonna get rid of that stuff. Bit of the hot glue that sticks around. Okay. And now, these are ready to be attached. Now, again, we can attach, you gotta think about this before we move on, right? In this instance, again, my piece is moving away like this. So if I were to attach this to the bottom, like this, it really couldn't move because we already have a big piece here. So I'm going to adjust this so that this big end is over here, and then my slider is going to come up and over this way. Now again, if I think about this, in this instance, if I were to have this stationary and this move, it would show a piece of my plastic here. So I don't necessarily want that either. If you did it, it would be okay, but we're going to avoid that. So instead, for this model, I'm going to put my stationary like sliders on the top, and then they're going to move back. So in that instance, I do kind of want these pieces over here because they're going to slide in the sleeve in the back. So I'm going to take both of these and lay them on top here. So tiny bit of hot glue. Again, we do not need a lot. I'm going to make a line. And then I'm going to position this on top of my drawn line so that drawn line is in the center, and so that my straw more or less lines up with that line all the way down. Again, some slight variation is going to be okay, but a lot of variation is not going to work out for us. A lot over here as well. Line it up. There you go. Okay. So now we're ready to make this thing slide. So again, here's my piece. I need stationary pieces attached over here that this can slide in also. Now, the distance between like the end of our straw, well, we don't really need to worry about that. In this instance here, we want these straws to be cut at about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3 squares. I'm going to cut. I like these to be a little bit bigger because it just provides a little bit extra support. If they're too big though, you won't have enough movement. So we got to like kind of pick and choose here, because as these things slide, they're going to start off about here, right? So you can see we've got that much space for movement, right? This thing is going to be able to slide back and forth on this straw. This piece here is going to do the same. It's going to slide back and forth on this straw. So again, this thing's going to lay like this. So in my instance, I am going to glue on the opposite side. Again, I'm going to put this on my line. I'm going to line it up. One small strip of hot glue. We really do not need a lot of glue for this. Line this up also. Okay, so those are done. So now that they're cooled off and dry, we can test. We put our piece on. We should be able to move our piece back and forth nicely, right? And of course, like we are now inside of the second straw. So when it slides in, it looks like that. When it slides out, you know, it looks more like that. So that moving piece is now on. We are ready to start working on attaching our servo and getting some pieces put together here to move on to our next steps. So we'll move on to that in the next video.